It's the first ever Orange Bloods Modcast that's live. Myself, Anwar Richardson, Jason Suchomel will be taking your questions. We'll be talking about all of the hot topics of the day that orangebloods.com and the Texas Longhorns universe is talking about. So, yes, lots of Quinn Ewers, lots of recruiting, signing day just around the corner, whether we're talking about Kelvin Banks' decision to wait and decide I guess the second signing day. Jason, the calendar's so messed up these days that I can't even remember what's up and what's down.
Yeah, it's all jumbled together at this point, right?
Yeah, so Jason, I'll start with you as we get things started here on, again, the first ever live Modcast. Do us a favor. It's super interactive. If you've got questions, leave them in the chat section. We'll be answering your questions. We want to be interactive. Like the video. Subscribe to the channel. We hope this is a success. We wanted to try something a little different. We'll see how this goes. And then if it's a roaring success, shout out to Rogue Apothecary, who's already the first one in the house, leaving among the first sessions or questions or comments, and is a sponsor of the Monday Overreaction show. So shout out to Rogue Apothecary. Okay, Jason, I'll come to you first. Okay. If I think up is down and down is up because things have been kind of off the wall for the last week or so, how you feeling?
Tired. I was going to tell you maybe to bring like an air horn in case you see me nod off in the middle of this modcast. You can wake me up, man. Things have been changing by the hour, it seems, with this recruiting cycle. We're less than a week from the first day of that early signing window as we talk this out. It's crazy, man. Like I posted some updates yesterday on several of the remaining Texas targets, including Kelvin Banks and a few others. Kobe McKenzie, the recent linebacker commitment. And that was at about 5:30, and about 6, I had to leave for about an hour and a half to go do some dad thing for my daughter. Man, when I got home about 7:30, things were moving again. So I had to jump right back on the phone and, get right back to work and post some more updates. So, you mentioned Kelvin Banks. That's a big development. We had mentioned on Orange Bloods, I think it was maybe Monday or Tuesday, hey, there's a possibility now he might not sign in December like he was originally scheduled to do. That was still up in the air. There was talk about Jimbo Fisher from A&M pushing his in-home visit back to January, not doing it this week. Well, lo and behold, last night it comes out, Kelvin Banks tells us he is, in fact, going to wait till February to sign. And I see Kelvin's going to wait till February to sign his letter of intent, make a decision. Sark was supposed to go in home on Friday night of this week. Now, Steve Sarkisian gets one in-home visit. If I'm Steve Sarkisian, I'm pushing that back, and I'm going to save it for January. I mean, I don't think you need to use that bullet just yet. So I don't think it's certainly not catastrophic for Texas Ketchum seeing Kelvin Banks push it back, but it's not what you wanted if you're a Texas Longhorn fan. Texas right now, I think, has the lead. You wanted him to wrap this up and put a bow on it next week, and that's not going to happen.
Anwar, Quinn Ewers is going to be a big piece of today's conversation. To everybody asking questions in the comments section, we'll get to them. I promise. It's going to be super interactive. Let me just kind of get through our initial back and forths with both Anwar and Jason, and then it will be Question City. The Ewers discussion, from your vantage point, you've been reporting in on this. It is what to this offseason? Is it the biggest story? Is it the story of the year? Like, in your mind, as this thing unfolds over the course of, I don't know, the next 4 or 5 days, if it even takes that long, you think we're watching what in real time?
Well, I think we were watching what could be like a defining moment very early for, Sarkisian and their staff, because it is huge. I mean, we can't deny the impact of it. I mean, when you say the name Quinn Ewers, it's like putting everything in your SEO search and having it all pop up. It's what it takes, in order, every website is popping because of it. You can't deny it. Twitter is popping. He ends up being trending the entire time. So we can't necessarily just act like, it's just another recruit. No, it's Quinn Ewers. It's a huge freaking thing. Can't downplay it. Last time I remember something this big and impactful, but it was just for a short period of time, probably was when Kyler Murray decided to descend upon Austin, and he tweets out the thing about his jersey. And but it was such a short time span, right? It was just, he did it, what was it, Jason, maybe over a weekend. Mm-hmm. And then a couple of days later, like Sumlin's in the house, and then Kyler's back at Texas A&M, right? So, but there's so many things at play. There's so many factors. It's Texas versus Texas Tech. And you're like, Texas Tech, like they're in the conversation, but they are in the conversation. And, it ends up being a thing where if you get that guy, it ends up being a defining moment for you. If you lose him and you lose him to Tech, then there becomes a lot of different questions. And again, that's no disrespect to Tech. It's just, I don't know how many 5-star quarterbacks Texas has nabbed. I don't know how many 5-stars they've nabbed, and it would be a huge get for Joey McGuire in year one. So can't deny that it's a huge defining moment for, Sarkisian very early in his tenure.
You know what this reminds me of, Ketch? When last time you and I were live on one of these was pregame for Oklahoma. Remember? And we were talking about that game being a defining moment for Steve Sarkisian, and it was great for about an hour and a half, and the wheels fell off. So for everybody watching this, they better hope this weekend goes better than that weekend.
Why you bring that up, Jason? Damn.
Getting a bit of a mulligan on
this for clarity. It won't be and Jason and I talked about this earlier this week. It wouldn't be the end of the world if it doesn't happen, but it would still be viewed as a loss. That's all.
Well, I think that it's something I think we've all written about to some extent. If you get Quinn Ewers, it completely hits the reset button on the Steve Sarkisian era to a certain extent, because suddenly you're able to frame a real starting point where, not to completely look, I'm the last person in the world that would just say this past season was meaningless, but in terms of framing who you're going to be as a program and how should you view a season through which prism, right? Because if you get Quinn Ewers, you've got a 2-year window in his mind, I think, to do something with him. I don't think he's a guy that views himself as somebody being on a college campus beyond the 2023 season. So it makes these next 2 years, if Ewers is a guy that comes in the fold, I think it shapes the way we will view the Sarkisian era in a way where after this first season, we all just kind of shrug our shoulders. What does it mean? What happens next? What are the expectations supposed to be for the second season when you win 5 games in the first season? Ewers gives the program a shot in the arm in terms of momentum. I think it gets everybody turning the page on last season. It gives them a story to tell that's slightly different in a positive way from what they currently have. And I'll bring up one of the first comments, our first comment of the day that we'll take as we get a little bit interactive here on our live Orange Bloods Modcast. James very early on said, and as I pull the question up here, and it's not popping up on the screen for some reason. Here it is. VY and Ewers are the only quarterbacks to be rated 1.00 by Rivals. I think he means the 24/7, whatchamacallit, right? The consensus. What do you call that thing?
Yeah.
Whatever the damn thing is where they merge all the rankings together. I don't know what a 1.00 Rivals ranking would be. I don't know what that is. Good. So I'm assuming he means the composite. I don't follow Ewers a ton. What skills make him rated that high? You guys mind if I start with that for a second?
Sure.
I think, Ewers is, for the old timers out there, he's kind of the new age Todd Marinovich in that he really has been shaped and created to be a super quarterback, if you will, a guy has had phenomenal coaching, phenomenal development as a young player. He's been incredibly successful on the field at South Lake Carroll. And I think the thing that probably stands out the most to me is that from an accuracy standpoint, he's probably the most accurate young quarterback I've ever seen in the short to intermediate range. He can make, I think functionally every throw that needs to be made. I personally don't think he has the strongest arm I've ever seen. And I know I've created some pushback from that from people who want to show videos of him throwing the ball 80 yards in a throwing contest. That's not exactly what I mean. I don't know that I watch him a ton and see him throw balls down. I don't see him make Malik Murphy throws sometimes where Malik can throw a ball down the seam on a line 25, 30 yards down the field and make you go, whoa. But Ewers can do almost everything else. You know, when you look at a 5-star ranking for a quarterback on the state of Texas level, 70+% of the time they end up drafted and in the NFL. 60% of the time they're either the number 1 overall pick in the draft or a high-level first-round pick. When you think about Vince Young, you think about Matt Stafford, who's the most obvious one that's in my head right now that I've completely forgot. But there haven't been a lot. But as it's hard to call a guy a sure thing, but on paper, Quinn Ewers' basement would seem to be a very high-level college player who's going to have a chance to play on Sundays. He elevates the Texas quarterback room at a time when, with all due respect to everything that I thought about Hudson Card going into the season and or the rest of us might have thought about Casey Thompson, obviously Alex, who's not here, excused by absence because one of you watches the Modcast and let him have your hunting lease for a day, which, hey, knock yourself out, Alex. He'll be back just after we finish the Modcast today. But it's a chance to improve a position that will go without him. And even with him, you go into the 2022 season with some uncertainty. For me, the single biggest miss of this season is that the quarterback position under Sarkisian was almost a complete throwaway in year one based on the way that it ended. You don't go into next year with that. No doubt about it. That's our guy because he balled out all season. And it means that a guy like Quinn Ewers could be the most important new addition to this program for all the reasons that I've outlined.
Yeah, Hoppy, and what skills make him rated that high? It's you've covered a lot of it, but it's basically everything. His accuracy catch, you pointed out, is second to none. It's as good as I've ever seen. His ability to anticipate and see the field as a high school quarterback is as good as I've ever seen from a high school quarterback. And a lot of that is he plays in a really good offensive system. He's got really good coaching or had really good coaching at South Lake Carroll with Riley Dodge. The arm strength thing, like I remember talking to someone close to Quinn and he trained with the same guy who trained Patrick Mahomes for a while. And talking to someone, he said, hey, he had higher velocity than Mahomes had. So he's got plenty of arm strength. I just don't know that he always needed to make those rifle throws 20 yards downfield in that South Lake offense where a lot of times they had guys running free. But he's kind of a no-brainer. I mean, there's no such thing as batting 1,000% in recruiting. I mean, there are going to be misses, but Quinn is about as safe a bet, I think, to be like you said, a high-level college player as I've ever seen, probably second to Vince Young. Vince still is the greatest I've ever seen, I think, but Quinn is certainly in that same ballpark.
Anwar, go ahead.
I'm just curious for you guys. As more of a question because you guys have done recruiting for a combined 50 years. You guys are old.
Don't
as hell,
do that.
right?
That was going to
It's like if you put everyone's together, you guys have been doing it for like 50 years. I mean, I'm kind of curious. Where is he ranked though, as far as prospects in the state that you guys have seen? And now you've seen a ton. Have you seen Ketch? You've seen Drew Brees. You've seen Kyler Murray. I mean, top 5 from prospects that you guys have seen. I'm just kind of curious. He may not be the best, and I know Kyler Murray is a little bit different. Brings a little bit different. Even though Quinn is pretty fast, though. I know he's got a sub 5 40. So I know Jason, you may know that a little bit more. So I'm just kind of curious.
Yeah, he can run the ball. I mean, he's probably, if I'm guessing, probably if you laser time him, I'd guess 4.7. That's a guess on my part, but he's effective enough as a runner where he can keep defenses honest, which that's what coaches always want to see. But that's a good question. Ketch is much better of a historian than I am. My brain doesn't retain things. I still say Vince and Adrian Peterson, DY and Adrian Peterson, head and shoulders the 2 best players I've ever seen as terms of prospects. if I'm like going through, I think Quinn would be in that top 10 for me of all time of prospects I've seen. He's just got such a high ceiling that he could be the next Kyler Murray number 1 draft pick, Matt Stafford. I mean, he's every bit of a Matt Stafford type of prospect. Now, will he realize that potential the way Stafford did? That remains to be seen. There's a lot that needs to happen first, but he's every bit of that type of prospect, in my opinion.
My top 3 all-time quarterbacks, like my Mount Rushmore waiting for a 4th guy, has Drew Brees on it, who I saw play 20 times live when he was a high school athlete from his sophomore year on. And he came out of high school, and before he ever played a college game at Purdue, I was telling people on the old Austin 360 message boards, and Tex Larry, one of the most famous posters in the history of the site, he's still on Orange Bloods. He can verify that I said this because it's the thing that I think gave me street cred with Tex Larry forever, as I predicted that Drew Brees would be a Heisman finalist before he ever played a college game, and he was a 2-time Heisman finalist. Vince Young is the best player I've ever seen at the high school level. He is the only guy that I've ever watched and thought that guy is an alien. The third guy on my list is Garrett Gilbert. For how his story ended, if you had seen him in high school and how he willed, once upon a time, Anwar, Lake Travis was known as the program that choked in playoff games. Before Garrett Gilbert came around, they lost to my Austin McCallum Knights in a playoff game where they were state ranked and I think undefeated. And Todd Reesing was their quarterback, who later went on to be a great player at Kansas. And they couldn't beat my Knights. And my Knights are not the type of team that normally goes into the playoffs and knocks off state powers. But then Garrett Gilbert came in and was just a different dude. Then he had a torn labrum at the end of his junior season that he played with as a senior. It messed up his mechanics. It never got completely healed. He had a horrible Texas career, and then c'est la vie, it just kind of changed from there. I think Matt Stafford would be the guy that I would rank 4th because no one's ever had an arm better than Matt Stafford. The only thing that ever held Matt Stafford back from me as a high school prospect, Jason, is kind of the thing that holds him back as an NFL player, right? It feels like Matt Stafford has been a freak for 15 years or more, but has always been a guy that just never wins the big game. And just, you always have questions about how good of a player he actually is. And look, Kyler Murray as a high school player is pretty hard to compete too, right? Like, he had baseball questions. I hated his attitude as a high school player. I didn't know if he would survive with the attitude that he had in high school at the collegiate level, but he's obviously maybe the best player in the NFL right now. Ewers would be in my top 10 quarterbacks all time. Because I don't know personally that I think Quinn Ewers is better than Cade Klubnik. In fact, I rated Cade Klubnik, who is now the Rivals' number 1 quarterback in the country. Way back when he wasn't on anybody's list, I was like, I think Cade Klubnik might be better than Quinn Ewers. And I had them basically ranked side by side. You know, Cade Klubnik might win another state championship. So his career has to be respected. But Ewers is a 5-star player and a 5-star talent. He might not be what I think is a mythical 6th-star player, but it's a safe bet. It's like Jason said. If you want a guarantee on the box for a guy who should be at worst a really good college player, I think that's what I think that's what Quinn Ewers is. He's almost as sure. If that guy went to Texas Tech, he would put up Graham Harrell numbers. He would. His career might not mean anything, but he'd probably throw 4,500 yards, 5,000 yards, throw a bunch of touchdowns. And I'm not even thinking of like the Tech offense of today. I'm just thinking about under Leach when it was just pass, pass, pass. They'd never had a guy, I think, at that skill level of a Quinn Ewers. So if Quinn Ewers ever played in a pass-happy offense, I would expect them to be record-breaking. I don't know if that means the NFL is going to absolutely drop their jaw when he arrives, but they'll have something to look at. Anwar, I wanted to ask you. You've done some reporting on Quinn that we've talked about on previous shows on the the Orange Boys Texas Football channel the last couple of days. Let's just circle back real quick to how you think, based on what you've heard, how this thing likely rolls out, because you were given kind of a timeline for when this thing might potentially, finish. And I saw other reporters, whether it's Brian Davis of the Statesman and a few others that got their own updates on Quinn Ewers yesterday, but the timeline was a little bit less settled in their reporting from whatever it is that they were told versus what it is that we were told.
Well, so the timeline, I'll start with the timeline. I worked my way from the last thing you said and work my way forward or backwards. The timeline I said was optimistically they would hope for it to be done on Monday. Like that was the optimism. It wasn't saying that it would be done by then. It was just those who are in that situation closer were like, optimistically, Quinn makes a decision by Monday. That can maybe help whatever school, whether it's Texas or Texas Tech, in that final surge for guys. Like he's already committed, and now all of a sudden all the guys are out there, especially if you're Texas, all those offensive linemen who need to make decisions. Maybe that sways them. So that's the timeline. It's optimism, but it's definitely no guarantees on the box. I think there's a couple of things that in play, and Jason and I had like a little conversation about this yesterday. So, Quinn is scheduled to visit on Saturday. It's a big recruiting weekend, the last recruiting weekend before signing day. That's on this upcoming Wednesday. Now, here's the thing. There's a lot of things that we can outline why Texas makes sense for Quinn. But there's two things I think that you have to, you factor in. And the main thing, you guys know this with your 50 years combined of experience because you're old as hell, is that today's Thursday in the recruiting world. I know it seems like digs though. Even though
Anwar,
you guys, technically, right? Technically, I'm older than both you guys.
Not technically, you are. Factually.
After two digs, you deserve that. Today is Thursday, and in the recruiting world, Thursday to Saturday is a really long time. I mean, in the recruit, like every day is something different within the recruiting world. By the way, I feel like there's an echo at some point here. But in any case, maybe I need to turn myself down. I don't know.
You sound good to us.
I'm getting a little bit of it too, but it's not bad.
Yeah, so if maybe Jason, if you could turn me down a little on your thing, and maybe whoever. But anyway, so I think for the thing that's kind of key is getting to Saturday, like being able to say, okay, you got the guy on campus and he's here, like because again, it's Thursday. I think Quinn was supposed to have an in-home visit. What day was that, Jason, by Texas Tech?
Yesterday, Texas Tech. It wasn't Joey McGuire. It was their new offensive coordinator. Went in yesterday for an in-home visit. And
yeah, okay.
Talking to Tech people, it went really, really well. So
correct. And so, what you got to hope for if you're a Texas fan is that you get to Saturday and have that opportunity. You can't take anything for granted. And again, Jason can speak on it because Jason's been doing some reporting too. Tech still is alive. Tech is still a program that you just can't overlook and just say like, all right, it's Tech. Like, who the hell is going to go there? Well, hell, he's considering it. So you don't like sleep on it and act like it's not going to happen. It's not a possibility. So Catch, what the plan is, or the schedule plan was for Quinn to get there on Saturday and be there and be around the guys. That report that I had was confirmed by every other media outlet that's out there. So that's out there, but it's Thursday. And Jason, you still got to get to Saturday, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, Anwar and I, we talked late.
Hey, Jason,
night.
real quick, because before the comment changes, we'll be talking about 5-star offensive linemen in a little bit, a lot. Just wanted to point out one of the first 5-star offensive linemen that you and I ever covered, Alfio Randall, in the comment section, letting Anwar know that his microphone is good. So we've made the Alfio shout out before. So wow. I know Crazy, right? Small world, but you and I are old enough to have actually covered his recruitment back in the day.
How long ago was that, Catch?
I'll let Alfio tell you that. I don't want to just be randomly dating the people in our chats, but yeah, we've covered a few. Anyway, sorry, Jason. I just wanted to point out, shout out to Alfio Randall, who now goes by Alfio VC in the chat, but former Longhorn. And one of the best offensive line prospects my young eyes ever saw back in the day.
Now they wouldn't see him as clearly because we're too old, I guess.
I didn't have glasses back then.
So, but Anwar and I spoke last night, and Ketch, you and I did as well. There is still confidence. I mean, on the Texas Tech side, and I would say moderately high confidence, and it's so not counterproductive, counteractive to everything. We hear something that's so dramatically in favor of Texas, and you start thinking, okay, it's looking good for Texas. And then I hear something that's so dramatically like, no, don't sleep on Texas Tech, and it may be trending that way. You don't know what to believe. I can't even count how many different people I've heard from that have a nugget or two on Quinn Ewers. So you've got to kind of filter through the BS and try to know what to believe and what not to believe. But I'm with Anwar that if you're Texas, you've got to get to Saturday. If you get to Saturday and you get him on campus, you're getting probably the last crack at him. I think Texas looks really good there. Would it be the biggest surprise in the world to me based on just random things I heard if Quinn Ewers said, you know what, I don't want to mess with that hoopla of Saturday. I'm going to go ahead and decide before then? Not really. I mean, Quinn seems to change his path quite a bit. If that happened, I don't know that it would bode well for Texas. So if you're a Texas fan watching this, which most everybody probably is, you just want to have the sucker get to Saturday, have Quinn Ewers show up for the visit that has been widely reported and Anwar was on top of. If you get to that point, you feel pretty good about yourself if you're Texas. But I don't know that it's a guarantee that it gets to Saturday. So it's a story we'll still be watching closely.
And Jason, just building off of that and the comment that Pete has that Michael put on the screen, the one thing that seems to be really interesting in this is that you hear a lot of confidence on the Tech side that they've got him. Like they've got an agreement in place. Like you hear a lot of confidence in that. You don't hear that from the Texas side. What you hear is they're still recruiting him. There's still a possibility. These are all the pros of coming to Texas. But the Tech side it's like, man, this is a done deal. Like it's a wrap.
Anwar, it feels like rich guys at both schools think they're getting home. So we hear like I think there are even Tech coaches that are much more, a little bit uncertain. Like they feel confident, but they're not saying it's a lock. I mean, we checked in to sources in the last 48 hours and nothing was described quite like that. But if you talk to people with money, I've had a billionaire text me last night that was like, it's all locked up. It's good to go. But both sides, this rich group of rich people, think that they've got this thing in the bag. And I feel like the uncertainty is a little bit more when you go down the various levels, all the way down to the coaches that were recruiting them. But both sides do look confident. You guys okay with taking some questions?
Sure. Let's do it.
Well, let's start with Trent here. If we miss on Ewers, does Sark definitely have to bring in a transfer?
I think you have to, and Anwar can jump in here in a second. Interestingly, among all the rumors I heard this week regarding Quinn Ewers was that, hey, if Texas doesn't get Ewers, maybe Texas fans shouldn't panic because people inside the program aren't panicking because they've got some irons in the fire that nobody really knows about yet. I don't know what those would be. I wasn't given any specifics. I don't know if that means maybe they're expecting someone to enter the portal that's not yet in the portal. I don't know what it means, but to answer the question, I think Pete would answer the question. Yes, I think they have to get a quarterback in the portal. Who it would be, I don't know yet. And it may even be somebody that's not in the portal yet. I heard some rumblings about that this week that there could be something else big in the works potentially, depending on what happens with Ewers. But I'm still kind of chasing my tail on that rumor. I don't know what it would be.
You know, I think, what's interesting, Catch, is I think if you bring in a grad transfer at quarterback, that when you talk about like your stability in the room, if it's an older person, I think that probably has the capability of shaking up that room and causing more of a departure than Quinn Ewers would. I think if Quinn comes, maybe you lose one of the guys, right? I mean, I think you'd say maybe Hudson, maybe Casey leaves. I mean, that makes sense. But if you bring in an older person, typically, when you go to the transfer portal and you're bringing in, a senior per se, they're coming here with the thought process that they're going to start. And again, what they think and what it ends up becoming reality are two different things. But I think if you're talking about what could spook the room more than anything else, bring in a senior grad transfer quarterback. And I think that probably spooks the room. And I think there's probably more of more probability or possibility, that's the word I'm looking for, possibility that you lose both of them by bringing in a grad transfer quarterback that's an upperclassman more so than just like a transfer guy would be.
See, I would think it would be the other way around, because if you bring in a senior upperclassman, he's going to play 1 year and he's gone. If Quinn comes in, he could play up to three years, or I guess even 4, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, could.
Sure.
You don't expect that, but so that's interesting. Where I would think a senior, they could be like, especially Hudson, he could be like, you know what, it gives me another year to learn, and then this guy's gone, and then I can maybe slide back into the starting role. If Quinn Ewers comes and earns a job, they're not beating Quinn Ewers out once he earns a job.
Well, for instance, if you're Casey Thompson, you've got 2 years of eligibility left, sitting on the bench for another year and only giving yourself 1 year to get to your ultimate goal doesn't work for you, right?
For Casey, honestly, if he doesn't win the job, he probably would be better served to transfer, regardless if it's Quinn Ewers or because you're right, he's not going to want to sit for 1 year, certainly not 2 or 3 years. So I mean,
correct.
It would make sense.
I think what we don't know, and then we don't know from a depth standpoint how Charles Wright feels at this moment, right? He was the 4th string guy behind Ben Ballard.
Yeah.
There, he's a scholarship guy. I think Charles maybe look at the writing on the wall and can either say, "Hey, this is going to take a few years to develop," or he might say, "I don't know," right? So I'm just saying now all of a sudden you might be left with this grad transfer and potentially just Hudson and Ben Ballard as your 3 potentially.
Malik Murphy will be here in January.
And Malik, I'm sorry, I apologize. And Malik, obviously, which golly, poor Malik.
Shame on you.
Poor Malik.
Forget about my guy, Anwar. Shame on you.
Or you know what, Malik? Like on the as we should have this build up to Malik. Oh man, we don't even talk about him.
I do. Look, I think Malik Murphy throws the football better than Quinn Ewers. That doesn't make him a better player, and it doesn't mean he's more ready to play right away. But one guy played his senior season this year and had a phenomenal year.
Still having a phenomenal year, Catch. They're playing for the state championship on Saturday. So.
And weirdly, because they played their freaking junior seasons in January, that guy's played like 20 games worth of football this year. So the thing that we said about him back in January was, God, that guy needs game reps. He needs practice. He's barely played. He also will be an early enrollee that if Ewers arrived, those two guys are competing for snaps in practice. And I don't completely dismiss Malik Murphy, even if we've spent our time talking about how he's a 3-year project. That guy has so much arm talent. And now he seems to have very rapidly progressed as a player that a lot of the conversations that we were talking about 8 months ago with him don't feel completely fair anymore. I'll talk about him. I think one of the really interesting – look, here's the thing. We saw it with Casey Thompson and Cameron Rising. You bring in 2 quarterbacks in the same year. I don't care what you say. It's hard to keep both of them beyond 12 months. It just is. So I think those 2 guys show up midterm together. I think it's full-on competition. And I think if you're Quinn Ewers, the very first thing you've got to do is be better than Malik Murphy before you can say you're better than Casey Thompson. And I think they both come in as scout team players on day one that have to elevate themselves up the depth chart unless there are transfers. I don't think it's as cut and dry. I think we would all expect Quinn Ewers to be the guy. We do. But I won't completely write off Malik Murphy because, and Jason, you've seen him throw in person. He can just throw the football. Of all the guys that I think would be closest to Matt Stafford, I think Malik Murphy's more Matt Stafford from my God, did you see him make that throw than even Quinn Ewers is, even if I think Quinn Ewers is probably the most accurate quarterback I've ever seen.
Yeah, different strengths. The best thrower of the football I've ever seen live is Trevor Lawrence. I mean, I saw Trevor Lawrence. I didn't even know who Trevor Lawrence was, and I was like, "Who the hell is this kid with the long hair?" Like, I go to these camps, and sometimes you're like, "Oh, it's a little boring." But watching Trevor Lawrence, even in a camp, was a thing of beauty. Man, that guy is just everything about it's beautiful. Malik, I've seen Malik. You're right, at a couple events, and I mean, his arm talent is right there with any quarterback in the country. Is he as developed and as far along as Quinn Ewers in the mental aspect? And I mentioned Quinn's ability to see things before they unfold. Probably not. But you know what? Malik has made tremendous strides this year, his senior year. You said it. He basically had almost what amounts to 2 senior seasons. So he's showing up in January. I talked to him a couple weeks ago, and Malik, man, someone put in the comments very early in this Modcast that Malik Murphy has some of that dog mentality, and he does, man. He's as nice as a kid you're ever going to meet, but he also is coming in like, hey, I'm not coming in to take a backseat to anybody, he told me, and this is before the Quinn Ewers stuff really blew up. I'm coming in to compete with Hudson. He goes, I want the best man to win the job. I want what's best for Texas, but I want to be that best man, and he's going to give it everything he's got, and he's confident he can be that best man from day one. He understands he's got to earn it and earn the respect of his teammates. But, yeah, I would not ignore Malik Murphy by any means, regardless of what happens with Quinn Ewers. I think Malik Murphy, his ceiling, now his floor, we keep talking floor and ceiling, his floor is lower than Quinn Ewers probably, but his ceiling is as high as any quarterback we've discussed. I mean, he's that kind of talent.
But we would say, I think we can safely say, though, if both guys hit campus in January, Quinn has a little bit of advantage because he's actually been on a college campus.
Absolutely.
Right. And regardless of where you think he was where he was on the depth chart, he actually was in a college program. And so he would probably enter in with it. It's at least a little advantage, right?
Yes.
I would think so, Anwar. Yeah, absolutely.
Although it needs to be said that Ryan Day described Quinn Ewers as a guy that needed development. I'm fascinated to see by what he would look like in the spring at Texas, knowing that the former coach that had him, described him as an immensely talented kid, but a kid and a guy that needed development. Texas's needs will fast forward his maturation process a little bit like it did Hudson Card's this season. Jason, let's go on to another question because I want this extends the offensive line, but really it's kind of about everything. Josh Roberts asked, maybe the O-line guys are waiting to see if Ewers commits, and then the dominoes will fall for us. Your reaction to that?
I don't think so. I don't think so at all. If Quinn Ewers was to commit to Texas Friday, Saturday, Sunday, even Monday, it's going to help. I mean, it's going to give Texas a selling point. Hey, we've got Bijan Robinson. We've got good running backs. We've got Xavier Worthy. We've got some wide receiver talent. We have now a premier quarterback. No disrespect to the guys on campus, of course. It's a selling point, but I don't think those offensive linemen are waiting to see what Quinn Ewers does. I mean, if it's going to have a immediate and direct impact on recruits, it's probably going to be at the wide receiver position more than it is certainly with the offensive line. Is it going to help Texas with guys like Kelvin Banks and Devon Campbell? Yeah, because then you can say, hey, look, man, this is a big piece to our program. This is a piece that's going to make our program and our team better and help us compete for championships. Come be a part of that. But I don't think those offensive linemen are waiting to see what Quinn Ewers does. I don't think Quinn Ewers deciding for Texas, if it comes to that, is going to be a deciding factor for those offensive linemen. Not at all.
What do you think about Evan Stewart? I mean, that's the sneaky little rumor is that Quinn Ewers could impact that recruitment. I think you and I view Evan Stewart as a shoulder shrug. I mean, If he flipped to anybody, if he flipped to Florida, we would go, oh, well, I mean, you never know with Evan.
Yeah.
But
he just committed to Texas A&M, and I've reached out to Evan yesterday, and I didn't hear back. Evan and Quinn, they're not like best buds. People act like they're connected at the hip. They're not. I mean, they've worked out a couple times together, and Armani Winfield too. His commitment to A&M is so fresh. Since then, he's made videos that are him working out, and it's all A&M. Like you said, Ketch, Evan is such a wild card, and this is the same guy who decommitted on a midnight on a Thursday and then decommitted on a midnight on a Thursday exactly a month later and committed to A&M kind of out of the blue. So nothing would surprise me with Evan, but it's purely speculative, I think, by Texas fans. It's a little bit of wishful thinking. Would it be the biggest shock in the world if Evan at the last minute had a change of heart? No, but right now I would not put it in something that I would expect to happen. And
I know this is, probably goes against all whatevers, but you're reporting. I think I also saw something and another website, Michael Roach. I don't care to give him credit, but he had something recently that said, like, I think he spoke to Evan, and Evan said he was solid to A&M. He was visiting A&M this weekend, and it was pretty much a wrap, ribbon and bow on that one. So even if Evan says that, I would still leave the door open a bit. Sure.
And honestly, if Evan said, Evan could say anything, and I think he's one of those guys. And weirdly, I don't mean this in a bad way. He just bounces to the beat of his own drum. It's not like we're talking about Zach Evans, where it was like, where I think there was a slight character concern with the aloofness. I think Evan Stewart's a 17, 18-year-old kid who's enjoyed the recruiting process, who's got a big personality. His mind changes a lot, and you know what? That's not uncommon. Think about where we all were at 17 and 18, right? So. Yeah. How about any boy or girl that's ever had their heart broken by somebody who told them they loved them one day and were hanging out with somebody completely different the next? It can go that way. Here's an interesting question from way back early on. I think we got this one like 30 minutes ago, but I think it's a good one. Who helps more, Quinn or Gary Patterson? Anwar, you want to take a swing at that?
I mean, again, it all depends on what capacity we're talking Gary Patterson is in. If we're talking if Gary Patterson's an analyst, then it means nothing. I mean, if it's because an analyst's job essentially is just to gather information, do some pre-scouting work. They usually are not allowed to have input in meetings because they want there to be a hierarchy usually within the staff. So analysts usually have their role. So, so I would say Quinn would help for just Quinn helps to make the brand bigger. Quinn is what's bringing the national attention here. Pete Thamel isn't writing about if Gary Patterson may or may not come to Texas, but he sure as hell has some updates on Quinn Ewers, right? I mean, Gary Patterson doesn't trend on Twitter. Quinn Ewers does. Quinn's the guy that can move the needle for the next few years. So, I mean, I get what you're saying from like a football standpoint. What helps? I think at this point you got to hope that maybe a second year in the system might help these guys. But again, unless it's a DC, and I'd be really surprised if Steve Sarkisian has been waiting, weeks and weeks and weeks to fire Pete Kwiatkowski. I mean, it's usually something that you would probably handle right away.
Or you wait till after signing day.
Yeah, I mean, you could wait until after signing day, but it just seems like
we've seen that Patterson give you a jolt in the arm in recruiting, at least in the state of Texas, in the way, I don't know if you were really going to hire Patterson to be the DC. I think this is an instance you don't have to wait till signing day. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe there's some guys that are committed that would shake loose if Kwiatkowski departed, but I don't know that I've ever had him described. I've heard him described. Remember when Junior Angelau?
Anthony Jones might be the one, the edge rusher out of Nevada. He was committed to Kwiatkowski at Washington. But yeah, I think you're probably right. Most everybody else would probably stick. So.
I'm reminded of Derek Wareheim back in the day, Anwar, with Junior Angelau. And when you got a big target and you got an assistant coach who's largely responsible for that relationship, that's where you might make a bad decision based off of the importance of a single recruitment or two. I don't know that Kwiatkowski is viewed that way in recruiting in a way that like, oh my God, we have to wait till signing day. But it is an interesting conversation. Real quick.
The thing is, what's interesting about it is that we've, towards the end of last season, you started hearing stuff from Sarkisian about like, hey, how many coaches have these guys have had over the years, and how many defensive coordinators that these guys have had, over the years. It would just be an interesting move after one season to say that, okay, some of these guys, you're willing to put them on their third defensive coordinator in 3 years or 4 years or whatever the case may be. I don't know. That's why, again, first of all, Patterson still believes, for people I've talked to, Patterson's still holding out for a head coaching job. Okay. So he hasn't closed that door on him being a head coach. He still wants to see if there's any dominoes that fall. And then after that, if he has to be, a coordinator somewhere, I was told he's only going to go to a place that he believes is going to compete for a championship, because if he believes it can compete for a championship, that'll get him back into the head coaching position that he wants to be in, because ultimately he's been a head coach for, a billion years. So, he's not looking to just, I want to help Texas. It's going to be, what strategic move do I believe can make that I got the pieces in place where I can be back into as a head coach in another year or two. So I think there's a lot of more dominoes. And if he wanted a job, he could have taken this job. So the fact that he's waiting, I think that's just, I think you just got to let that thing play out.
Here goes Anwar age shaming again. He's been a coach for a billion years. So.
Hey, Anwar, real quick.
You know what it is, guys? I think what it is that I got a birthday coming up in a few weeks. I think maybe that's. I'm starting to think like, man, I'm getting older. I'm that.
How old are you, Anwar? You'll be what? You'll be how old on your birthday?
48.
See, I'm older than you. Yeah, I'll be 49 in April. So.
Are
you? Yeah. I thought. Yeah.
You guys make me feel young. I'm only 45. Speaking of which. Anwar, this is for you and me. Cody asks, we've been catching heat on Twitter all week. How much do you sit back and laugh at these folks that get so upset with you via Twitter?
Oh, he must be referring to the people who say we shouldn't report things. Is that what you're referring to, Cody? I just want to make sure I'm answering the correct question.
It was asked a while back, and honestly, people get mad. My answer to this, Anwar, would be, I call it Thursday when people, you know what I mean? Like, you're like, that must mean, and I'm like, I feel like I do 25 things a week that if I go into my mentions, something's going on. I mean, there's a reason why. Look, some people, it's like the old adage I say in reporting. Some people report the news, and other people talk about those that report the news. And, it kind of falls that way on Twitter as well. Some people are the people that other people view, and some people are the guys that do the viewing. And Anwar and I are a couple of guys that get viewed, and it comes with, I've been doing this so long. It's the one thing. I've been hated for so long, for decades. There's nothing that I think I have to be a boring target, because people that insult me have been insulting me for decades now. And a lot of the times it's the exact same material. So I don't know.
There is no new material, by the way.
I just shrug my shoulders. I don't, it's just like, oh yeah, someone doesn't like me. And there's a big old, if I look up and I see I've got 20 plus mentions, I'm like, okay, what happened? What did I do? What I say? Yesterday I had Baylor people coming at me yesterday because I dared to reference the Baylor rape scandal with the hire of Jeff Lebby at Oklahoma. It happens.
For me, Ketchum, I'll just answer it, real quick. There's people who are like, oh, you shouldn't report it. Well, look, our job, first of all, our job is to report, right? That's just what we do. And our job is not to be a mouthpiece for UT. If other websites choose to do that and that's their path, so be it. Go ahead and do your business. It's a weird business model to say you have to ask people to pay for inside information and just not give them inside information. I think that's it's an interesting model, but say we know about it. We're just not going to tell you about it.
Or
and then
when it happens, we knew about it after it's been reported. We knew about it.
Well, shit. And hell, we should do that, Catch, and I'll take off the rest of the damn year if that's the case.
Just wait until things happen and then say, well, we knew that. In fact, people think we do that. It's like, on one hand, people constantly bitch at us because they think we're holding back information. And on the other hand, they get mad at us when we don't hold back information. So,
and there are times when you have to hold back information, but some people act like it's every time they're holding back information. I mean, the three of us discussed yesterday, there was a thread on our message board about a new player possibly entering the program, and hey,
that young man doesn't want his recruitment really talked about right now. So
when it's appropriate, we'll report on it when it's appropriate. Right now it's not appropriate. We got to respect his wishes of sources, otherwise we won't have those sources. So there's some give and take there. Absolutely.
Some rapid fire questions, and Jason, this may mean I'm just going to give you the floor in a little bit, but real quick, Michael Rockman, someone did mention that people just wanted to know the basic. What would the Quinn Ewers impact on Arch Manning be? Yeah, real quick, my thought on that, just Jason, real quick, is that 5-7 has a bigger impact on the recruitment of Arch Manning than the presence of Quinn Ewers does. But I can make a case that Quinn Ewers and Arch Manning don't cross paths a whole lot. If Quinn Ewers shows up, I don't think Quinn Ewers plans on being around that long. Arch Manning probably would prefer, I think, a red shirt. Eli redshirted. So I don't know. It may take at least the pressure off of Arch to be the guy that has to save the program. I think there are a couple more mini positives than there are negatives. But yeah, 5-7, and that being Texas being Arch Manning's best option of all of his options is the thing that Texas is really going to have to battle more than anything else, from my perspective.
Yeah, I mean, Quinn Ewers shows up and plays 2 years. Arch would have to sit behind him, and that's the best case scenario. He plays 2 years and goes pro. Arch would only be sitting behind him for 1 year, which would be, like you said, a redshirt year. So I don't think it's a deal breaker. I don't think it would help Texas. It would be one more thing that they'd have to sell against that and say, okay, hey, listen, Arch, here's why it still makes sense. But the bigger issue is 5-7, like you said, in the fact that you're recruiting against the Georgias of the world, the Alabamas of the world, Clemson, who's a little bit down, but you're facing some pretty heavy competition there, and Texas needs to play better on the field, probably more than worry about the Quinn Ewers effect.
By the way, Jason, it's to piggyback off of that. One thing I in some of the reporting that I've been able to do with the Arch Manning situation, I was told that he's okay and the family's okay with him being redshirted because they think more of the development standpoint. And I mean, if any family knows about how to develop a damn quarterback, I think the Mannings do. So they don't look at it at any point think, oh, he needs to go in. They're okay with him sitting in the oven for a little bit of time and waiting his time until he's ready.
Mm-hmm.
Hey, Jason, let's just real quick assume that I'm looking for a question that specifically talks about the offensive line. Here's one. Odds on the avalanche occurring. I define that as landing Quinn Ewers, then having the impact on the others, including some big O line fish. Let's just focus on the big O line fish for a second.
Yeah. If you would have asked me that question on Monday, I would have put the odds a lot higher than I have them now. Kelvin Banks pushing his decision back is not a good thing for Texas. I mentioned that at the top of this show, that him waiting till February opens the door for a school like Alabama is now trying to get involved. Maybe Miami, Louisiana State, obviously Texas A&M. If he was going to decide this week or next week rather and sign on Wednesday, I would have felt pretty confident picking Texas. I'm still keeping Texas in the lead, but hey, a lot can happen. Anwar said a lot can happen between now and Saturday. A lot can certainly happen between now and February. Devon Campbell is visiting Georgia this week, kind of came out of the blue. Georgia thought they were going to get Ernest Green, who's a highly rated offensive lineman out of California. He's now going to Alabama, it looks like. So Georgia comes in, makes a run at Devon Campbell. They're late to the party, but it's Georgia. I mean, they're kind of like Alabama. You can never ignore them in recruiting. I still like Texas' chance with Devon Campbell. People I've talked to, kind of sources behind the scenes, still think they're in a really good spot there. I think Texas is going in home tonight or tomorrow with Devon Campbell. I'll get my days jumbled together. But, Cam Dewberry is going to visit Texas A&M this weekend. He is going to come to Texas this weekend too. Not sure which one of which day. I think I favor Texas A&M there a little bit. But, again, I keep saying on Orange Bloods, hey, there's some moving parts, and some of these things impact the others. If he shows up and gets word that Devon Campbell's coming to Texas, could that impact Cam Dewberry? Absolutely. Malik Agbo is a guy that I think is trending well for Texas, a lineman out of the Seattle, Washington area. He really liked Oklahoma. They've kind of fallen off with the coaching change, although Bill Biedenbaugh is apparently staying at Oklahoma, so I need to see how that impacts things. Auburn was heavily involved. I was told yesterday, hey, Auburn's kind of cooled off on him a little bit. So that one seems to be setting up well for Texas. Nadio Umeozulu is a lineman out of Allen, Texas. Total wild card, but I don't know where he's going to go. I know USC is a player there. I think Alabama, Texas too. I don't know that Texas leads, but I don't know that I'd put anybody else above Texas either. So they've got plenty of irons in the fire. But there are, and I keep using this term, there are some moving parts in these things. None of them are stone cold locks for Texas. Kyle Flood has the challenge of slamming the door on one or two of these recruitments. Malik Agbo, Cam Dewberry are both going to announce for sure next week. A couple of those other guys are probably going to wait into February. I didn't mention Cam Williams, who decommitted last night from Oregon. Mario Cristobal goes in yesterday, does an in-home visit with him. Mario Cristobal now at Miami, of course. He decommits from Oregon. There's a thought that Texas has a good chance there, but he's already visited Miami before Mario Cristobal was there. So he already had a fondness for Miami. Now Mario Cristobal's there, so keep an eye out for Miami in that one. He's now not going to decide until February. So suddenly these things are going to probably take a lot longer than we originally anticipated. And Texas is going to have to continue, to battle some pretty heavy competition.
Jason, last question before we wrap things up. We're basically at the hour mark. Kobe McKenzie, I feel like maybe he feels like the guy we haven't talked about yet.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. And he crossed my mind earlier. Someone asked about him, so I'm glad you brought him up. Kobe, just a little bit of backstory. He committed to Oklahoma almost for 2 years. He decommits the day Lincoln Riley takes the USC job. Texas swoops in. They get him in for an official visit last weekend. He commits on Sunday. On his way home from the official visit, he was committed. He announced it that night. Well, everything was great. He loved Texas. He's going to be done with it. He locked it in. Not going to mess around with anything else. But they said, you know what? We'll probably go ahead and give the new Oklahoma staff a chance to come in, just out of common courtesy. Well, they come in, and Brent Venables yesterday does an in-home visit with Kobe McKenzie and his family and just blew the doors off. I mean, we said it earlier about Evan Stewart. These are impressionable kids, and these are good coaches who are good salesmen, so you shouldn't be too surprised. I talked to Kobe McKenzie's family member last night, and they said, hey, man, they discussed it as a family. He is genuinely torn between the two. They said, we're going to go dark on it. It's going to be Kobe's decision, but they're not really talking to anybody. So I want to respect Kobe's wishes. I want to respect his family's wishes. Right now, Oklahoma had the last crack at him, man. So I'm going to go in our war room tonight on Orange Bloods. I'm going to make predictions for each player. And this is a total guess on my part because Texas did a really good job on his official visit. But Oklahoma having the last crack, getting to make that lasting impression, causing him to pull back a little bit. My guess, and it is a guess, I'm favoring Oklahoma a little bit with Kobe McKenzie getting that last wave of momentum.
Anwar, you had a question for Jason to wrap us up?
Jason, just real quick. I know it just seems to be the porch I stand on, but I'm just going to stay here for a second. Does Texas need more than one receiver in this class? I mean, I know I feel like I ask this every week, but I mean, Troy Ramirez is recovering from his injury. We've heard great things about him when he's healthy. Jordan Whittington is recovering from his injury, and he had an impact. But we also saw what Xavier Worthy was able to do, and like it seems to be like that's a kind of Sarkisian kind of recruit. That kind of speedy, take it to the house kind of guy. Do you need more than one in this class, or are they content with the 15 that they got on campus?
No. They need more than one, Anwar, and at times they've had 3 committed, and they've only got 1. So Evan Stewart was a one-time commit. Armani Winfield was a one-time commit. They've got a young man, Savion Red, that's going to take an official visit this weekend. I'm assuming if they're bringing him in for an official visit, Savion doesn't talk much, but assuming that they're bringing him in for an official visit the weekend before signing day, they're going to push for his commitment. I was actually told his visit starts today. I need to double confirm that, make sure it starts today and not Friday. But regardless, he's coming in for an official visit. If Texas pushes there, they'll probably get a commitment there. But, they're still going to work on Armani Winfield. There are not a lot of other options. And for Texas fans, it should be a bit frustrating. I mean, if you can't recruit wide receivers well in a Steve Sarkisian offense, that's a problem. And Texas didn't recruit the position well last year. Xavier Worthy, I consider him almost just not even a recruit. He was basically a transfer who signed with Michigan, came to Texas because Sark had a previous relationship with him at Alabama. He almost flipped from Michigan to Alabama. That one, I'm not saying Sark didn't have to earn it, but that one kind of fell in Texas's lap. Michigan screwed some things up, so on and so forth, and look how much it benefited Texas. I mean, where would that wide receiver room have been without Xavier Worthy this year? And, I hate to throw Andre Coleman, the wide receivers coach, under the bus, but he's got to do a much, much, much better job. Last cycle and this cycle have been just borderline disastrous in terms of recruiting results at that receiver position. I don't know what they do there. Do they find a way to help Coleman out? Do they make a change? I don't know. It's speculation on my part. But to answer your question, Elmore, they absolutely need more than one receiver in this class, and they have one right now in Brendan Thompson, and that's it.
All right, folks. Look, we're going to have more live shows leading up to signing day itself. We may do the Modcast live next week. We'll look and see how this thing performed and how popular it was, but we do have to wrap it up primarily because I have to be somewhere with my wife. So look, for no parting shots. We just answered questions and talked Texas football all day long. We'll get Alex back next week. We won't be under any time restraints. We'll hear his update on his Spectrum internet and find out whether or not he has to go erupt like a volcano or whether or not it's the holidays. Here's hoping he catches something because he may get home and his internet sucks and then he'd really be upset. But for myself and Anwar and Jason, we really do appreciate you guys hanging out with us. This was over 600 people strong so far, at right this very second. So it feels like it was probably the right thing to do this live. We've enjoyed it. We'll do it again next week. Thanks for watching the Orange Bloods Modcast. Until next week, you guys take care of each other. Later.